Hello, Huw Turbervill here, the editor of the Cricketer magazine, the world's longest running and biggest selling magazine, of course, in cricket. And I've got a gold star guest today in Mr. David Gower. Good morning, David.
Thank you. A very good morning to you.
Thank you. It's the latest interview in my Huw Meets column. And David has been... series, I should say. And David has been writing for the Cricketer now for a year and a half. Were you with the Cricketer years and years ago, or have you written pieces for the Cricketer in the years gone by?
Now, there's a question. I'm not quite sure how to put this. I was part of the founding of Wisden. Now, that might seem a familiar name, but, it's just one of those things, you've dropped yourself straight in it, young Huw.
I did.
So I used to write when, I'll try not to mention the name if that helps you. I used to write columns when that first started, which is a long, long time ago. So I was a very young player, trying to make a name, or making a name in Test cricket, and wrote this ephemeral and very, very lightweight column. So hopefully nowadays we're a little bit more interesting. But of course, the problem is always this: when you're actively involved in a game and in the dressing room with teammates, your reflections are inevitably, shall we say, controlled, slightly muted. When one has a bit more freedom, a bit more experience, and dare I say it, a lot more age, then one is allowed to go a little further. Even so, I'd still like to consider myself reasonable, balanced and reasonable, whatever I write.
Yeah, well, the Cricketer and Wisden merged anyway, so to become the Wisden Cricketer. So yeah, it's all good, all good. I'm thinking about those kind of fly on the wall things. Simon Hughes wrote this, sort of, he really did sort of reveal what was going on in the dressing room, didn't he? I think in the Middlesex dressing room, just perhaps a little bit too much information for some, but
Well, no, but that's interesting. I respect Simon a lot actually, because he's managed to make a lot out of that career as a county cricketer. He's managed to keep a career going for a long time since. He's interesting to talk to, interesting to listen to. Has some interesting views. It's provocative stuff sometimes. And of course, I admire him because a lot of Hard Yakka and books like that were things that revealed stuff from within the dressing room. And I think although one's natural instinct is to sort of protect those alongside you in dressing rooms, and there's always been this sort of force shield on the end, on the dressing room door, which means that whatever happens inside is well protected. So I think it's interesting for those that follow the game and love the game to have a little bit more revelation. So yeah, hats off to yours.
Yeah, a lot of Hard Yakka. We've been doing sort of slightly different column, working together for the Cricketer, and we've been taking people out to lunch, haven't we? You've been doing sort of written columns as well, but we've had some sort of lovely lunches, haven't we, with some cricketers and some non-cricketers who like cricket, haven't we?
Yeah, it's very hard work, as you of course appreciate. It's an extraordinarily hard task to try and fulfil.
Yeah.
It's been fun to do. I'll give it. I mean, that's the easiest thing to say, and very interesting. As you said, we've had cricketers. We started with Graham Gooch, which might have taken people by surprise, but Graham's very cooperative. Had a nice lunch in a pub way up north near Yarm, ahead of a theatre performance. We've had Alan Lamb, we've had Chris Cowdrey, and others. We've done the most recent one that you and I have happily sat through in Twickenham, somewhere near Twickenham, just to vaguely locate. It was Samantha Bond, who I first met when we were both in our 20s. And she's been a cricket fan ever since, as well as, and mainly, of course, the most superlative actress for all that time as well, with a huge range of performances. It was quite fun, actually, of course, as you know, because you were there. The first thing I said to her was, well, how's Marlowe then? And I see you've taken up nude swimming. Because in that Marlowe murder mysteries that she's recently done, there was a scene of her swimming serenely down the Thames at Marlowe. But she, of course, has an extraordinary litany of performances, from Shakespeare all the way through theatre into film. Miss Moneypenny, which of course she was keen to play down as 4 minutes of her life, handy though it was. So it's what I like about the whole thing, of course, is when we go away from the cricketers necessarily. And for instance, Sam was lovely, but then you've got people like Piers Morgan. Now, I realise that Piers is not everyone's cup of tea, and he knows. He's the first to realise that, but he's a fascinating man to talk to and an easy man to interview because he is one of those people that you basically fire off one gentle question and he's off for hours. So it's just a question of steering it in the way he wanted it to go. But it is, it's a very enjoyable thing to do, to meet people. I knew Piers before, I knew Sam before, but sit down and talk about their love of cricket as well. So it sort of draws it in to the remit of this magazine.
Yeah, so Samantha Bond was in Marlowe Murders on UKTV, I think. And
Marlowe Murder Mysteries.
Marlowe Murders on UKTV, and that's a new series, so you can catch that. And she was great. I got on her nerves a little bit, I think, because being a huge James Bond fan, I just wanted to talk about James Bond. And as she,
what about? Okay, can I remind you about Joanna Lumley?
Well, no, we can come to her in a minute. We have a special segment on her in a minute.
Okay, fine.
Samantha Bond she did 4 James Bond films, Pierce Brosnan era, and it amounted to 26 minutes of her screen time. And so, I'm not sure my presence was actually that helpful on this occasion. It was a pleasure to meet her. She did tell us some quite good stories, didn't she, behind the cameras, which were fun. Some can print, some can not print. But I can understand her frustration that she gets remembered for being Miss Moneypenny for 26 minutes when she's done all this other stuff like Chekhov and Shakespeare and so on. Yeah, but okay, well, you mentioned Sir Chris Cowdrey, Martin Nicholas, Piers Morgan, Samantha Bond. Let's go to Joanna Lumley. She is my screen goddess. she is marvelous.
Can I say it was rather obvious that? How long have you had a crush on Joanna? Let's face it, it's a crush that the entire nation probably shares.
Since Sapphire film.
I think she was a little. I would suspect she was a little sort of surprised to see that you'd found photographs from sort of the 70s, posing with Australian cricketers wearing not much more than pads and gloves.
Yeah.
She was great. I'd say she was great to talk to. The connection, for those that either didn't read the piece or don't know, the connection is that her husband's a fellow called Stephen Barlow, who is top of the field, top range opera conductor, the most eminent in this country. And he and I went to school at the same time, King's School, Canterbury. We didn't overlap necessarily in the music scene. My career as a pianist and a clarinetist was much shorter than Miss Moneypenny's time on screen, I can tell you that. And nor was he the first-class cricketer that I became. But the connection was there. So that was how we managed to persuade Joanna to come and join us for lunch in the middle of London. And an absolute joy it was too. Let's face it, these lunches do induce a certain amount of salivation. Normally it's over the food. In your case with Joanna, I don't want to say what it might have been. But
You'll get me cancelled. She insisted on me putting her. She told me to put my hand on her shoulder, didn't she? I had to explain that in the magazine because I knew somebody would sort of say, "Oh, what are you doing? Hands everywhere." She told me to put. She's absolutely lovely, wasn't she? So warm and charming. Her husband was there, wasn't it? We should point out. He was at the lunch and probably got on, probably found me a bit irritating. But no, she loved the fact that I knew all about her career, the New Avengers, Sapphire and Steel. Amazing career. Yeah. The other. We had a couple of other. Gary Lineker was very good, wasn't he? Very warm, and we met him in Barnes, didn't we?
Yeah. No, Gary's good. I've known Gary for a long, long time with all the Leicester connections from way, way back. I see Gary whenever I can, actually. I guess it's sadly not often enough, but he was very easy, very relaxed. Took us to his local, 5-star restaurant.
Well, he met Alex Ferguson in there, he told us, didn't he? Which was an interesting encounter. Perhaps
met and been shunned by Sir Alex, who
was not his biggest fan. Yeah, I don't think they made the piece, but that was a good story, I have to say. I've mentioned most of them now. Tim Rice as well. I think the other interesting one we did, but don't forget, you can read these in the Cricketer magazine every other month. You do a column, then you do a lunch. But the other interesting one was Moeen Ali, wasn't it?
Yeah, Mo, I caught up with in Dubai, the first iteration of the ILT20. So that's what a year and a quarter ago. That's sort of 15 months ago or so. And I mean, I admire Mo for all sorts of things. I mean, one of the things, of course, that links us is that if you listen to things like Aggers on TMS or TMS is the general thing, when Moen's playing, every now and again, someone will come out with the line, a Gower-esque cover drive or something like that. So there are some very interesting parallels. I mean, the style of play, although I think he hits it a bit further when he gets airborne, the sort of ability to make it look languid, and also the problem of being challenged for looking too languid, which is something I had to sort of live with all the way through my playing career, and in fact, still exists now, because of course there is the cliche when you meet people who claim to be your childhood, I was their childhood hero, stuff like that, and I have to say my childhood admirers, or from their childhood to now, they're getting a bit older, and some of them got quite aged, but the sort of cliche is either, yes, we loved your cover drive, or are you still getting caught at second slip, which of course was a cliche promoted by those that watched the game through my sort of 15 years of international cricket. So that sort of issue is still current, and it's Mo's turn to go through it, because of course when he's playing nicely, when he's playing properly and playing well, he's an absolute delight to watch. And he's a role model for his community, for the Muslim community in this country, which I think is very, very important. Obviously, I mean, that is a divergence. I can't say I was ever a role model for Christianity in my case. But those similarities were interesting to talk about. It was a very relaxed lunch, which actually, can I make out one point? Of course, normally speaking, as the cricketer, we try and entertain our guests to lunch. We don't want them to be out of pocket. In Dubai, Mo, with his largesse of the Sharjah Warriors, of whom he was captain at the time, was very happy to save us the expense. So we can thank him on both counts for being such an interesting such an interesting interview, and also providing us with lunch.
Definitely, he was aware of the Gower-esque comparison as well, wasn't he?
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's face it. Whatever is said anywhere nowadays, be it verbally, on social media, be it transcribed, be it repeated, these things, as they always did, have a habit of reaching you eventually. And I'm proud that he, so as it were, I can live on with someone else playing the shots. I don't have to go through all the agony of walking out to the middle, wondering what's going to happen next. We just watch Mo instead.
I suppose looking at other players like a bit like that. I mean, James Vince used to sort of is a player easy on the eye who got out in frustrating ways as well, wasn't he? But yeah, there are.
Yeah, I mean, James again. I mean, James got an extraordinarily good record, and as captain of my second county, Hampshire, there's a bit of a link there as well. I mean, I love the way James plays. He's got again that sort of, to use the same word, to a language style, easy style, is part of what makes the game enjoyable to watch. I mean, this is still the fascination of cricket, is it not? That we have a modern era which is the short form of the game, where the format is basically see how far you can hit it and how often. And you've still got the devotees of our county cricket, of state cricket in Australia, of first-class cricket around the world, and of the longer form of Test cricket, who are happy to see a little bit more time taken, happy to see style as well, and to enjoy style. And I think I still think that's a very valid thing for people to enjoy, because I think the aesthetics are part of it. I mean, I'm apart from being obviously fully embraced by cricket and having enjoyed basically a life of cricket. I mean, my other sport is tennis, and you can watch. Who do you want to watch? The answer was Roger Federer. The way Federer used to play. Can I say I'm a fan of the one-handed backhand? I don't play it quite as well as he did, but every now and again there's a moment of almost genius. But you watch people like that, and the joy is just seeing those individual strokes. It's just seeing the apparent ease with which the best play a game as tough as tennis.
Definitely. So, I mean, I was going to ask you this in a bit, but it kind of ties in as well. They think it's all over, the quiz, long-running comedy quiz show on BBC, and that was with Lineker, wasn't it? And that didn't do your brand any favours, I feel. I think that the ridicule you got sort of detracted from your achievements. You are one of England's greatest captains. You're England's attractive back than ever, and yet they ridiculed you, and that annoyed me a little bit as a child, I think. Yeah.
Well, thanks. Actually, Jimmy, can I put the other side of that same story, which is, first of all, you're right in one sense, because I did about best part of a decade as an alleged team captain on They Think It's All Over. And you're right, the job description was to enjoy a bit of lively banter, try and get a line in edgeways. If you want to use the word ridicule as a more polite word than the other possibilities, it was done in jest and done in fun. And the irony is this: at the end of my 10 years or so, Gary and I were actually allowed to leave, shall we say. In my case, it was apparently said I had other projects to look at. I have no idea what they were, but anyway. And one of the bases for that's one of those cliches of all time. If you see someone in the press, oh, he's got other projects, it's normally total lies. Anyway, the time it was said that some of the focus groups, and proving how useless focus groups are, some of the focus groups basically said, well, why have they got those two rubbish sportsmen on the show? Because, as you say, all that happened was that the lines were against us quite often. And they obviously had missed the point that 30, 40 years before that, we were indeed proper sportsmen at the top of our games. Now, the counter to that is that actually the TV audience that They Think It's All Over had, which at a peak was something like an official sort of 12, 13 million, for late night BBC Two TV on a Thursday and a Saturday, that audience actually expanded my brand. It's not a word I use a lot normally. I don't normally think of myself as a brand, but I suddenly found myself in demand elsewhere, doing things, for instance, films for the BBC, travel show, travel films in Mumbai, in Australia, in California. And I found, for instance, the litmus test is this: walking down the street, encountering, that man, the man on the street. I found that there were far more comments coming about They Think It's All Over, which is a show that people enjoy, than there were about the state of English Test cricket. Obviously a bit of both, but it certainly broadened my horizons and gave me a much wider audience. So in the end, I was very, very grateful. And actually, I had no qualms about the role I was playing on the show. There were moments where it kind of hurt, where there were one or two moments, which I won't repeat here, where it seemed to go, should we say, beyond a line. And if ever you got hold of the recordings of those shows where, say an hour and a quarter was an hour to an hour and a half at worst, was trimmed down to 27, 28 minutes. A lot of the stuff that you never saw, it's just as well, because there are people like, say, Jonathan Ross, who can, is brilliant at a controlled rant, but has this knack of going beyond broadcastable stuff, knowing full well that when it gets to that line, it'll be binned, cut, shredded. But I sometimes felt very slightly worried, concerned for our audiences, because there'll be a studio audience of, say, 250 at White City, the BBC at White City. Not all of whom looked as though they're in the right place. So I was a bit worried sometimes about the sensibilities of our audience who'd come to see a comedy sports quiz, and suddenly found themselves immersed in something a little bit more edgy, which of course they never saw, or we never saw actually physically on a TV screen.
Well, I suppose that similar sort of thing happens when They Think It's All Over. Have I got news for you? Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we're 20 minutes in, and we haven't really talked about your career as a cricketer, and how do we sort of do that in a brief time? But I suppose your finest hour, dare I say, most famous hour, was the 85 Ashes, although actually probably winning in India was incredible, wasn't it, before that? That was a fantastic achievement.
Yeah, both rank highly for me, selfishly, of course. The Ashes always gets the headlines for sure, and to be an Ashes winning captain is, shall we say, rather special. That is a proud moment, and also happened to be, that was the the peak for me because two things. One, there was the joy of standing at the Oval 3 floors up with the Ashes in hand at the end of 3.5 months of competition as an Ashes winning captain. So a proud moment there. Two was the productivity from the best bat I ever used, which seemed to have a lovely, successful time throughout that 6-match series. So that's as good as it gets. If you can be a performer and a leader and a winner, then that's your perfect solution. India was a very, very interesting time, as historians will know. I mean, starting with the assassination of Mrs. Gandhi as India's Prime Minister at the time on the day we arrived, the morning we arrived, with the killing of our own Deputy High Commissioner Percy Norris in Mumbai a couple of weeks later, and with the whole tour in jeopardy, I can say, hand on heart, that actually it was a very proud moment again to get through all those issues, to go into that first Test match in Mumbai, 4 days after the assassination of our own Deputy High Commissioner, with emotions running very high and anxiety running high. Okay, we lost that first Test match, but to come back from that and win the series 2-1 was brilliant. I mean, the squad we had was short of the rebels, and it's a term I can use now. I mean, the likes of Gooch and Embry, for instance, who were still banned. Both of them was unavailable for that tour. But the people we took fill that breach absolutely beautifully. I mean, it was one of my favourites in a sense. Mike Gatting, first of all, as vice captain, prospered. That was the first time he'd really felt comfortable and fully part of the team. Produced 100 in Mumbai, double 100 in Madras, in Chennai. Graham Fowler, I was very proud of his performance because Graham had always been sort of treated as a naughty schoolboy. I mean, he still looks about, apart if he hadn't grown that massive beard, he'd still look about 12 now. But Foxy I was very, very fond of. And he very poignantly at the end of that tour said thank you to me because as a captain, I'd actually treated him as a grown-up member of the team, which is one of the great principles I had of captaincy. I might have failed on other counts, but this was the strongest principle, to give everyone responsibility for their own activities, their own fates, as it were, and get them involved in as much as possible as equal members. And so I was very proud of that as well, because that meant a lot to me, that he'd responded and that he appreciated the respect given to him. I mean, captaincy, of course, being what it is, you don't succeed with everyone, and not everyone's always going to agree with the way you do it. But if you have any successes, then I think you're allowed to claim them.
Mm. Yeah, so that was 1984-85, and I remember watching the highlights on BBC Grandstand. It was lovely stuff. That Fowler Gatting stand went on forever, didn't it? Double century, so absolutely brilliant. And then the following summer, 85, you got Gooch and Beefy back, didn't you? For that, I mean, and it just shows how sort of fickle the selectors were in a way, that you'd had that great series 85, and yet you didn't get to defend the Ashes in Australia in 86, 87. But what you did do was you played your part in that and buckled down under Gatting.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of skate over stuff. I mean, it's easy to skate through things. I mean, for instance, coming back from India, that great dilemma. Graham Fowler's had a great tour of India. Tim Robinson's had a great tour of India. One of them's probably got to go because Graham Gooch is, by definition, the better player. I mean, look at Graham's figures, magnificent figures in Test match cricket over a long career, and you can say that Graham was the better player. So you make a decision to get him back in the team at the start of an Ashes. Now, obviously, at the end of that Ashes, great news. Several months later, or 6 months later, a winter in the Caribbean has not gone well. One Test match, I was given the vote of confidence. One Test match against India at the start of the summer of '86. We lost that, so that was that. So handing over the T-shirt to Gat, handing over the reins of power, and that's how these things do work. I mean, I don't hold any grudges about that because, as I say, one's style, one's leadership can be seen in very different ways. At the end of the '85 series, I remember my first captain at Leicestershire, Ray Illingworth, who was then working on the BBC, Ray saying, words to the effect of, yes, David Gower's grown up, basically patting me on the back. Because at the end of that '85 series, people thinking, it's all working well. We've got things gelling, we're winning. By the end of the West Indies series, and another blackwash. another 5-0 drubbing. Well, of course, now the questions are being asked, about the same man in the same role as captain of pretty much the same team. And that's how it works, because let's face it, at the end of it all, one is hired to try and produce results. And I mean, I've seen it countless times. We've all seen it countless times. If the results aren't coming, I mean, for instance, what's the most recent example? Joe Root, bless him. Joe, who is the most outstanding player of our generation as an England batsman. As a captain, not so. Because Joe's such a good guy, they probably kept him in that role too long. I mean, I remember having to interview him at the end of the Caribbean tour a couple of years ago now, where the results had gone against him again, and it was obviously the writing was on the wall that change was needed. And I put it to him as it is a results game, isn't it? And he said, "Yeah." I mean, I like Joe very, very much, and no one dislikes Joe. You can't dislike Joe. And he was, I mean, and I understand, I sympathise entirely, because when I had my worst summer of all, i.e. '89, losing the Ashes apparently without trying. But when we lost the Ashes there, the pressure was immense. And yet you still had this thing, you think, well, maybe I could still do this job. Maybe there's just a bit of bad luck. And it's, you're always reluctant to give up something as important as the England captaincy. Although at the end, when the dust has settled, I mean, Joe would realise it and is very happy being part of the current regime. I would, of course, realised it in '89 as well. If it's not going well, then to be fair, you don't do the job.
Interesting. Thank you, David. I mean, you talked about West Indies, and that was tough for you, tough for England in the '80s. I mean, Australia had slightly better results against them, didn't they? They'd sort of lose series 3-1, but we sort of lost series 4-0, 5-0, didn't we? They must. I mean, must have been formidable playing them. That pace attack. I mean, how did it feel? Was it just?
Well, I mean, in a word, yes. I mean, it was formidable. As a batsman against them, you admire the likes of, say, Alan Lamb, who got hundreds against them. For Australia, Alan Border proved himself to be one of the best and bravest against that West Indies attack. And anyone in that era in the '80s who got 50s, 60s, hundreds against the West Indies was probably quite proud of it. But I always try and remind people that it wasn't just the bowling. I mean, yes, having 3 or 4 genuinely quick bowlers in your attack makes life slightly easier for Clive Lloyd, for Viv Richards, for the people who were captaining West Indies through the '80s. But they also had a stunning batting lineup. When you look at that 11, or if you look at any 11 they put out, I mean, you had 5 of the best batsmen in the world and 4 of the best bowlers in the world. And Dujon, or when I first played against him, Derek Murray keeping, then Dujon, who was an outstanding keeper batsman, very stylish with both, and very casual again to look at. But you had once you start with Greenwich and Haynes, Gomes kept getting hundreds. You had Richards, you had Lloyd, you had Richardson. I mean, if ever we had them in trouble with our bowling, someone would get them out of trouble. If ever we were competing in a test match and on apparently level terms, then someone like Malcolm Marshall, who was my vote for the best of them all, and that's in strong competition with Holding, Roberts, Garner, Croft, and the rest of them. But someone like Mako would come out and, as at Headingley in '84, with one wrist in plaster, sadly the wrong wrist, and there's a story about that, of course, but one wrist in plaster. And just when we thought we were halfway in the game, or maybe competing in the game, he took something like 7 for 58. So they had the ability to get themselves out of any trouble they ever found themselves in, both with bat and ball. So, I mean, for me, I am quite happy to put the argument forward, always try this, always do this, that they are that series, that West Indies team of the '80s was the strongest of all. I don't have personal experience of Bradman's Invincibles. I watched the Australians in the '90s, McGrath, Warne, and that host of great batsmen they had as well. But I would always vote for the West Indies as the stronger side.
They always used to, and also the tail ender used to sort of always get runs, didn't they? If you felt you got through the batting, someone like Winston Davis would get 77, or Michael Holding would get 50, or even Malcolm Marshall came out with one hand, didn't he? As you said, and he hit 2 fours, I think.
I mean, the Michael Holding one was the one that the classic was the ODI at Old Trafford, where they were give or take 150 something for 9 as Mikey strides in with Viv at the other end.
Mm.
And they must have put on, so I can't remember the exact, if they put on another 100, if we'd somehow managed to get either one of them out and close the innings down, it would have been a good game because we were bowled out for 156 or something. It would have been a classic game, but rather spoilt by Mikey hanging around at one end and Viv smashing it to all parts of Manchester. There were parts of Stockport in danger. The whole of Cheshire was in danger from sixes landing beyond the boundaries of Old Trafford. Spectacular to watch. I've got to say, but from fielding at cover, you have a great view of what's going on.
Mm.
And it's kind of etched in one's mind.
I remember I actually got my job at the Telegraph writing an article about England's lack of strike bowlers. And that's an example, isn't it, of how if England had somebody, just one of those guys to knock the tail over, we'd have been better, wouldn't we? But
well, actually, part of the problem, we didn't. Viv batted brilliantly as he did so many times, and he rather farmed the strike. So you, as a captain, it's one of those invidious situations. You bring men in, you put men back, you try and cover 87 different possibilities. You're desperately hoping to have 6 balls at Mikey to see if you can get him out. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And of course, from the boundary edge or a commentary box or a press box, you can already hear the sounds of people tearing their hair out. Why isn't he doing this? Why isn't he doing that? Why can't we get his final wicket? Trust me, on the field, you're tearing whatever hair is left out even more rapidly, trying to find a way through. But it's, as I say, you have a great view of a great performance, and if nothing else, that's something to remember.
One last question about that those West Indies encounters. I always wondered because I couldn't believe it. I was excited when you declared at Lords 300 for 9, setting West Indies a target on the last day. And in fact, just looking at the scorecard, Ian Botham probably one of his best innings against West Indies, 81. Do you regret not allowing Bob Willis to come out to bat with Neil Foster, who was 9 not out, and making a few more runs? Because you set West Indies a target of 3-4-2. And I think they got them fairly comfortably, didn't they?
Very comfortably. I think fairly comfortably is a complete understatement. To put that into some perspective, Peter May was chairman of selectors at the time. And in Peter's day, making 300 in a day was just not on. And it was a very flat pitch still, as the evidence suggests. And it was a lovely sunny day. It was rather a nice day for a 5th day at Lords and perfect conditions. So Peter's view at the start of the day was, I think we should declare early captain, to give ourselves time to bowl the West Indies out. And there was this dream of victory against the West Indies, which would have been absolutely wonderful. And I was a little bit more reticent, aware of the power of their batting, aware of the fact that it was, there was nothing in the pitch. Nothing in the pitch for the bowlers whatsoever at that particular stage. So I was, a little bit more wary. So we delayed the declaration till roughly, 45 minutes into play. So let's guess it must have been 11, quarter to 12, something like that. So just over an hour till lunch. And then 2 sessions after that. They got off. We got off to a flyer. We got a wicket early. We ran Desmond Haynes out, and that was very exciting. Yeah, you could say it was a mistake, but so we ran Desi out for not very many. So 1 down quickly. Right, we're in. We're at him. And then Gordon Greenwich played one of the best innings of his life. Larry Gomes just played a Larry Gomes innings, which was tucking things away, just picking up runs as the foil to Gordon. I don't think we bowled particularly well. I remember trying to sort of close off one side of the ground to slow scoring down. I'm not going to mention names, but Beefy wasn't brilliant at bowling to that field on that particular day. And it was an extraordinary performance. So yes, you're right. And to say that it was close would have been wrong. To say that they raced away. They had something like 14 overs left in the day at the end of the day when they got to 344 for 1. So to describe it as a chastening experience, again, would probably be a minor understatement.
Yeah, I didn't mean to criticise you. I mean, it seemed like a
No, no, no. I mean, I'm happy. It's long since gone here.
no, but it
It's
seems
a
to be a fair declaration, is what I was
it's,
going to say.
I'm
Yeah,
well, I'm
what
happy to explain.
but it seemed to be a fair declaration. And yeah, we were all hopeful that it was going to be a rare victory against West Indies. Okay, well, I mean, you've been brilliant, David. Thank you so much for this. Let's just conclude with your sort of
Mhm.
innings at Sky. I mean, and broadcasting in general. I mean, has that given you sort of satisfaction to be a commentator?
Oh, yeah.
Mm,
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, I mean, I've loved everything I've done there. Might sound cliched, but true. I am still available for work, although the doors appear to be closed in this country. So, still enjoy the travel. The cricketing world is a fabulous place to be. Over the last 2 or 3 years, Pakistan, West Indies, New Zealand, all of which are lovely in their own very different ways, fascinating to be in. So yeah, I'm still available for hire as a freelance, of course. But I know I love my day. I mean, it was basically BBC and Sky. So with a bit of Channel 9 in Australia when I first started, did the World Cup in '92 and a '92-'93 series with Australia against West Indies for Channel 9. And that was brilliant. That was a great education, actually, working with Benno, of course, who was at the BBC as well, the best of all time.
mm,
Tony Gregg, always entertaining to be with, Bill Lawry, the Chapels. That was fun, but the BBC gave me the first opportunity. When things changed in '99, the 20 years with Sky were great. And I've always tried very hard to impress upon people that whatever they see, so whether I'm hosting, whether you've got sort of the great men, sort of the Athertons of this world, Hussein, Botham, Holding, Lloyd, all sort of the great characters that are in some cases still there that we had over that period of time. Whatever you see on your screen, and there are, I don't know, 80 to 100 enthusiasts working behind the scenes, camera, sound, the technicians, the people that make it work, that bring it to the screen, are all very much part of that production. And you spend time with them, at home during the test matches, overseas, of course, different crews maybe, but you spend time with them all. And it's that team effort that makes the broadcast even more special. I mean, the likes of, okay, Beefy has been my mate for 40 odd years now. People like Michael Holding, Mikey, lovely to be with. Bumble, the great character that is still Bumble, but absent from Sky now for reasons beyond his control. And I'm still very angry on his behalf as to how all that unfolded. But these people are fun to be with, and therefore it makes it always a pleasure, never a chore. It's just a brilliant thing to have done. So as is well known, I was upset, disappointed when my time at Sky came to an end. You understand there are forces at work, again, beyond one's control. But I'm happy to do whatever comes in the future.
mm. Well, we got through that without getting you into trouble, haven't we? I think.
No need. I mean, absolutely no need. There is no trouble.
There's
It's
been headlines in the Telegraph,
um,
or whatever, but yeah, I mean, you should be on Test Match Special. I'm not just saying that, but I mean, it just seems a no-brainer to me that they should have you on there. But some people think I'm toading up to you, but that's just my view.
TMS when I was still playing, even in my Leicester days, let alone the Hampshire days, the last 4 years of my county career, I popped up on TMS now and again on winter tours. And of course, you go back to that era, which is 80s, early 90s, where some of the great names of TMS were still very much on the air. And it's again, an absolute joy. You say a privilege as well, of course, but an absolute joy to work with them in virtually every case. So I actually, yeah, you're right. I actually had an image of the possibility of going back to TMS when the Sky Days finished, joining up with Aggers, of course, who's an old friend from the Leicester days. And I think Aggers was pretty keen. But again, you've got this current view of things. So the hierarchy at the BBC saw it differently. So there we are. Doors close.
There we are, David. There we are. Well, people can still read your views in the Cricketer magazine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure we'll see more of you on the screens in future. And thanks very much for joining us. And
Well, on the screens bit, I hope so. And as ever, always a pleasure, never a chore.